So I'm going to see how this worked out. I put the sort of notification of this live stream an hour ago, so I don't know how successful it's going to be. What I'm going to do is stand by. I'll give it 10 minutes. If no one tunes in, then it obviously hasn't been successful. But the truth is, no matter what time I do this, it will never be an ideal time for everyone. So. Um, What I would like though is anyone who tunes in, please do participate. Ask me questions, share thoughts of your own, anything. The idea here is just to have interaction rather than me just talking about a subject as I would in other videos. So please ask me any questions, absolutely anything. Let's get something going here because I've had other live streams that were successful. So let's get going here. Um, just sitting in my front room. It's drizzling outside, which is actually kind of relaxing. I had a CD playing, so I'm going to take. But yeah, please ask me questions. Just leave them in the comment section. I'll address them. Anything at all. It could be about something in the news. If you want to ask my opinions about something you want to raise, absolutely anything. As long as I have participation. Just taking the CD out. I will be right back. Okay, so we have three people online. Love Jolie, Declan Marsh. Hello. Thank you, lads, for tuning in. That's what I need. So I don't really have any set plan with this video. I've got four people now. That's good. Uh, like I say, the only way this works is if with participation. So any questions, anything you guys want me to talk about, anything at all. The main thing is we just get a flow going here. If you don't want to type a lot, that's okay, but just maybe write a single sentence question, something like that. How have I been? Thanks for asking, Declan. I'm okay. I've been a little bit overwhelmed by things recently in terms of I've so much to tidy up. It seems perpetual in my case. There's always paperwork. There's always something to sort out. So that could be a little bit tiresome sometimes, but it has to be done. If anyone saw my video on the Navy recently, um, that's difficult. I'm still getting over that. And I also, you know, got an unfortunate response to my dating endeavor, and that you know, so those things haven't been wonderful. If I'm being honest, recently things have not been ideal, but you know, I take each day at a time. I just try to keep busy. So thanks for asking. Sloth Jolly. I assume that's sloth as opposed to sloth. How many more years do you plan to keep your YouTube career going for? Well, the career that I'm not sure if I'd say career because I'm not paid for this, but that's a good question. For a long time now, I've wanted to kind of really review my channel and sort of see how I can improve or tidy things up. Excuse me, I'm just trying to get a flat surface here. And the truth is, I have a lot of videos on this channel, maybe two and a half, 3,000. I do think I need to tidy up a little bit. But you know, I like doing this. I like vocalizing, and I'm very grateful that I have a platform, and I'm very grateful to you guys for supporting me. So as it stands, I plan to keep going. But it may well be that if I If I get busy in another area, or even if I get into a particularly prominent position, I might need to be a little bit more, let's say, how can I put it? Edit my time a bit more. For want of a better term, I might not be able to do this as often as I have done it. But certainly for the meantime, I intend to keep going. Um, Carl McGee, what are your thoughts on climate change? I'll come back to that one because there's a lot of detail with that one. Sloth Jolly, haha, I know you're not, but I find your insight more valuable than a lot of other political pundits on here, many of whom are funded, some by big money sources. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's a little bit of a David and Goliath situation, I think, with YouTube. People out there, and they get millions of views, and at, at the risk of sounding petulant here, I think some of it's rubbish, and frankly, I think I'm bitter. Having said that, I'm well aware that I don't have the flashiest channel. I don't have any special graphics. All I do is talk, and that's what I do. I did get advice from someone with good intentions saying that maybe I should do a comedy routine. This wasn't a subscriber. This was an acquaintance of mine, and his idea was that um, I kind of do a comedy stand up, and oh mate, look at they get lots of views. That's not the point. You can't be something that you're not just to get views. I mean, that would be very insincere, and I couldn't do it anyway. Um, Carl, if you don't mind, I'll come back to your question. It's a good question, but I'll just address some of the others first because yours is a bit more in depth. Tomoka, hi Nathan, what are your thoughts on COVID now? Personally, I'm not wearing masks anymore. Just going to get on with my life. I think the government need to focus on the 450 dying a day from heart disease. That's also an in-depth question. I'll come back to it. Declan, yeah, I know the feeling, being up and down, trying to, like COVID news, get to me, cases going up, etc., called Delta variant. Absolutely don't want another lockdown. But thankfully, vaccine seems to be working. Yeah, so I'll address this. I'll kind of amalgamate those 2 points because they're related. I'm fed up with the masks. I am. And actually, I've got an anecdote to tell related to that. Went to my local Starbucks recently, and most of the baristas there are okay. They're friendly, they're professional. But there's one woman, middle-aged woman. I don't know if she's in manageress or what, but she just has a bad attitude to customers. I've never got a good vibe from her. And recently I went in because I'd been volunteering and I volunteered for an hours. And anyway, I was with a friend, just wanted to sit down, and I was temporarily adjusting my mask. And this woman was just like, "Oh, you're not wearing your mask, you can't come in." And I was clearly wearing it. I was just adjusting it. So one thing that has come out of this pandemic is I think there are some mini tyrants who have a little bit of power and they let that get to their head. Having said that, I'm equally skeptical of, you know, the conspiracy school of thought, which is the virus isn't real. 128,000 grieving families tell another story. So I do understand the restrictions, but I'm fed up with them. And I personally think that the more people who are vaccinated, the more reason there is for us to get out of this once and for all. And I think one of the first things that should go is these damn masks. I hate them. I find them uncomfortable. I don't like them. The other unfortunate thing is when you get people like that woman in Starbucks, they ignore that some people have legitimate reasons not to wear the mask. For example, rape survivors, people who have asthma, other breathing conditions, they have legitimate reasons for not wearing it. And I do think that there's been some stigmatizing. When I see places like no mask, no entry, it's a bit sweeping. And I think they should be a bit more understanding and compassionate for people who do have legitimate reasons for not wearing it. But basically, I'm fed up with the restrictions like everyone. And, I've had my first jab. Oh, I'm due my second in August. Most of the country, as I understand, has been jabbed now. But having said that, I've no respect for these people who, for example, the idiots who hounded Professor Whitty. I cannot respect that. Um, people who are saying COVID's fake, they kind of remind me of people in the States who say after a mass shooting, oh, they're just crisis actors. I think it's not only stupid, it's also callous So I must admit that's something I've no respect for. But by the same token, I don't like the mini tyrants that have come out of this. I'm just like everyone else. I just want it to end. And yeah, I think we are on the right path, though. Um, I'll come back to some of those other questions. I'll get to Carl McGee now because he's been waiting patiently. Carl, if you're still here, what's my thoughts on climate change? Well, of course, I imagine you might be thinking about what's going on in Canada and the United States right now. 49 degrees in British Columbia Celsius. That's staggering. That is actually hotter than the Gulf states. I don't think we can look at something like that and say that there isn't something in it. Um, climate skeptics say, well, there's always been changes to climate throughout Earth's history, even before human activity, long before human activity. That is true, but not to the rate of acceleration that we've been seeing. So yes, there's always been climatic change, and there's always been ups and downs, which is why we had the ice ages. I should say I am not as versed in the subject as I should be, but I just think that there's a common sense aspect, which is if you get an ever increasing human population, we're now approaching 8 billion. I think it would be naive to think that so many people, mega cities constantly growing, that at some point that isn't going to start to have an impact on the not just the ecology but also the hydrosphere. So I must admit this is not a subject that I have looked into as much as I probably should, given its importance, given how much it's debated. I would like to look more into it. I'm definitely on the side the school of thought that there is definitely something in it relating human activity to the intensity of climate change. I just don't think we can say that it's irrelevant, as climate skeptics do. Um, I mean, you get someone like Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, who I think is appalling. I mean, this is a guy who outright denies COVID, and his attitude to climate change. He is presiding over a country that has one of the world's biggest ecosystems. In fact, it is the world's biggest ecosystem. And the cavalier attitude that Bolsonaro takes is frankly disgusting because the Amazon is largely Brazilian sovereign territory. Yes, it goes into other countries as well, mostly Brazil, but they are the lungs of the world. So I don't accept that I'm the president of Brazil, outsiders should mind their own business, and that's it. They're the lungs of the world. Um, So I personally think it is definitely something that needs to be taken seriously. And no doubt there'll be a lot more to say on that. Okay, just scrolling down to more questions. And by the way, this is good. I'm pleased about this feedback. I did think maybe it would be a bit quiet, so I'm pleased. We've got 9 people. So welcome everyone. Okay, let's see. Right, Johnny Fletcher. What are your thoughts on the group Patriotic Alternative led by Mark Collett? Um, I've never heard of them, to be honest. Mark Collett's the name rings a bell. I can't think from where. Patriotic Alternative. I'd be a bit iffy about any group who might. I don't know. Honestly, I can't comment because I'm not familiar with this group. Maybe I'll check them out after the video. I will say though, I want to be absolutely clear. I want nothing to do with far right neo nationalist type groups. You know, I might denounce the woke left, but that doesn't mean I've any time for the sort of blood and soil nationalist type ideology either. Absolutely not. But like I say, I don't know the script, so I can't comment on detail about them. It's just the name sounds a bit like, a lot of other groups out there that are masquerading as moderate, but they're really not. What are my thoughts on Matt Hancock? I've just been reading the newspapers actually. I've got like a queue of newspapers, as you know. You guys can see I collect newspapers. That's just from a couple of years. So yeah, Matt Hancock. For me, the issue with Hancock is, frankly, I don't care that the man's had an affair. I think that is only between him and his wife and his lover. He's let down his wife. That's wrong. But I've always taken the view that when it comes to politicians and relationships, there isn't a public interest. However, in this case, there is a public interest, and that is the double standards, the hypocrisy. Matt Hancock is a senior cabinet member. He's the health secretary during a pandemic. He is one of the architects of the restrictions that we are facing, and yet he broke them. And to me, this has echoes of the Cummings scandal last year, Barnard Castle, and so on. I think that if you are in a position of power and you bring in legislation that you expect the public to follow, then it's absolutely inexcusable if you break that legislation. So absolutely, he should have been fired by Johnson. Um, I don't believe in second chances for something like that, especially not when so many people have sacrificed. I can't say dying family members. In some cases, there is no excuse. So I have no sympathy for Hancock from that point of view. Um, Sajid Javid replacing him. I think Javid's a very capable politician. It is obviously a demotion going from Chancellor to Health Secretary. Nevertheless, he's back in cabinet. So it'll be interesting to see if it gets the same approach as Hancock or not. I do think with the government's approach in general, I'm reluctant to be too scathing because this is something that has been unprecedented. No government has had to face this since David Lloyd George 100 years ago, i.e., a pandemic on this scale. So I wouldn't vilify the government too much in terms of the response. I think honestly it's a mixed baggage. On one hand, we can be proud of the vaccine rollout rate, which is one of the best in the world. On the other hand, we also have a very high death toll. And I do think the government was slow to react in those early days. I personally support an independent inquiry. I know there's conservatives who say that, oh, it would be partisan, it's just, finger pointing. But if we don't have an inquiry, how do we learn from mistakes? I don't think there's any reason not to have an inquiry. It wouldn't be partisan because it would be independent. So it wouldn't be like the Labour Party's inquiry, it would be an independent inquiry. If the government's confident about their handling, why would they oppose it? In a democracy, you have to have transparency. So I support full inquiry. Maybe not right now. Maybe when we're totally out of the woods. But I would say there definitely has to be an inquiry. I mean, put it this way: we have inquiries over individual disasters like Grenville or Hillsborough. So something on this scale, which if you look at it this way, 128,000 people, that's like the population of say Gateshead, more. It's a huge number of people. So really, to me, it would be a bit crazy not to have an inquiry. Um, let's see. Paul Armstrong, we need sensible policies for a sensible Sunderland. Absolutely, I would suggest a sensible UK. Paul, that's well remembered that I'm from Sunderland. Yeah, sensible policies for a sensible Sunderland. I don't talk much about Sunderland politics because I tend to think more on the national or international scale. But yeah, one big thing here recently is the expansion of Nissan. Nissan is now the UK's largest car plant, I understand. I think Jaguar is still the biggest producer in Birmingham, but I think the actual biggest plant is here in Sunderland. It is huge. It's one of the biggest buildings in not just the country, but in Europe, and possibly even in the top 50 largest buildings in the world. It is massive. I mean, it covers a huge area between Sunderland and Washington, employs 6,000 people. Um, the thing about Nissan, I would say, as a local resident, job creation is always a good thing. I think it's good for the morale of the city. I would just be a little bit wary about Chinese involvement for the reasons I previously pointed out. I'm not going to condemn that. Johnson was in Sunderland. It's a very clever move by the Prime Minister. This is one of the red wall targets. He didn't quite break it, but came close. Yeah, Tomu, 49 degrees. It's staggering. When I was in Greece in the late 90s, it hit 46 degrees, and I got sunstroke. So I can only imagine what 49 degrees in Canada is like. It must be unbearable. And one woman said she was scared that this would be the new norm. Well, again, the climate skeptics say this is just a fluke. I think there's definitely something going on. Um, However, it doesn't necessarily mean that because we often hear, for example, about floods in India, like it's worse on record, but we hear that every time. I think what's actually happening is perhaps the strength of storms is increasing. Sloth, Jair Bolsonaro, Jair Bolsonaro, yeah. It went up 50 degrees in a small town in the province of BC. Of course, you're in Canada, Sloth, so you can relate to this. Um, and said small town completely went up in smoke after some time. Must look hellish. It must be like the bushfires in Australia. It must have that sort of feeling. Yeah, to me, Bolsonaro is one of the worst world leaders right now. The man is a complete, I think he's a thug in terms of the way he advocates torture, the way he flippantly talks about violence. For example, his threats towards regional governors. I think he makes Trump look moderate, and that's saying something. Carl, what concerns me about climate change is the rise of sea levels and the possibility of a huge amount of land being submerged underwater. Yeah, especially in coastal regions. If you look at the world's megacities, this is something I have studied closely. A lot of the world's megacities are on coastlines. Think Tokyo, Cairo, Los Angeles, Lima, Rio de Janeiro, Mumbai. They're all in coastal areas, right? So I think particularly for smaller countries like the Maldives, that is literally a question of survival, where those countries could literally be consumed. And that's astonishing. It would be like the lost city of Atlantis. So I personally think that I don't know how anyone can say that there is absolutely nothing in increased human activity and population and intensity of climate change. Um, I've joined late. Hello, everyone. Hello, Liana. And welcome, welcome. I like to see more female participation. Most of my subscribers tend to be guys, so you're very welcome. Please, if you have any questions or anything like that, please feel free to raise them. Let my papers go. Yeah, I guess you mean I should. Yeah, I've just too much to do. Always something. I mean, look at this rubbish. I just sort all of that out. A lot of that is just rubbish. It's like menus have got through the post, spam, um, magazines I need to sort out. It just seems to be never ending. The truth is, I've got too much stuff. I collect things. I collect newspapers. I collect DVDs. I have too much stuff, and I need to be a little bit ruthless sometimes and donate to charity shops. But I wouldn't say I'm a hoarder because I do have the ability to tidy up and I do have the ability to throw things out and give to charity shops. So I'm not at that hoarding level. You see these cases. I don't know if anyone's seen some of those reality shows where people hoard, and it's sad. I think there's mental health issues at stake there. But people are literally climbing over their own rubbish. Um, could you keep that pile? The amount of downloads and saved documents on PDD. Not sure what PDD is, but um, Liana, I assume you mean my newspapers? Yeah, for me, looking at a newspaper raw is far more interesting than I could look at any newspaper article online, probably with a subscription. But I just like the raw history of it. For me, this is their archives, and one day I hope to open a sort of museum of my newspaper collection. I've got about 5,000. That's only a small fraction. I mean, I've got literally boxes of newspapers upstairs, plastic boxes. Um, Tomu, Britain has deforested a lot of this country mainly for cows and sheep. Not sustainable in the long run, really, and not just because I'm a vegan. Yeah, I mean, that's true. I think it was, if we go back over a millennium, Saxon Britain was largely forest. I think it was really from the Norman conquest onwards that deforestation began abundantly. Probably the Saxons did to an extent because they built their cathedrals and churches out of wood. So probably it began in the Anglo-Saxon period, the Heptarchy. But apparently Britain is one of the least forested countries in Europe. I think we are second from the bottom in terms of most urbanized, least forested. I think it's only something like, don't quote me on this, I think it's something very small. 3%, 5% of the country is forested. I don't know what was number one. It might be Poland or Ukraine or something like that. But that's true, and it's an issue. Um, the truth is, though, Britain is an urban society. We're similar to South Korea in that sense. I mean, if you look at South Korea, a lot of people live in big cities. In Britain, over 50% of the population either lives in a city or a large town or a conurbation. Um, so that's true. But the only thing I would say about cows, and with all due respect, Tomu, this is not a new thing. It's something that's been going on for thousands of years in terms of domestication of livestock. That's all I would say about that. So it's not something that's a recent development. On PDF, simply cannot keep on top of it. Hard copy always better. Yeah, I find myself with in terms of data, I've had to get a lot of little memory sticks and try to edit them that way. I also take a lot of photographs of all sorts of stuff. Thomas, is football coming home? I don't follow football. England seems to be doing very well, so that's great. Obviously, I welcome that. But I don't particularly follow football, so I'm not watching these matches. That's my take on that. Seymour Parish, welcome. Do you have any thoughts on the incel community or men in general struggling to find relationships? Do you think social media has a part to play in this? I did actually make a couple of videos on this subject, and it's unfortunately still a taboo subject in the West. It's one of the very few things that is still taboo. Well, the thing with incel, unfortunately, it's kind of got a negative connotation in recent years because it's associated with a particular group of guys who go to internet forums, and they tend to be very misogynistic and they tend to blame their problems on women. And this hasn't been helped by the fact that a few years ago there was that incident in Toronto, that carnage in Toronto, where self-described incel guy got in a truck and basically plowed into people, killing 10 people. There's also the incident in the mass shooting in it was either Florida or California. Can't remember exactly now. But again, the guy was a self-described virgin incel. Um, there's a lot I could say about this subject. I will say that in the West, unfortunately, there's still this kind of machismo atmosphere of ridiculing guys, particularly guys, women as well, but I would say particularly guys who are deemed to be virgins. And I don't think that helps this dynamic. You get this sort of group dynamic where you get a group of guys drinking, and it's kind of this laddish thing. Oh, who's the virgin among us? Let's have a laugh at him. And the thing is, I believe there must be enormous mental health consequences coming about from loneliness, and it isn't just men; women are affected as well. But I think part of that comes from the stigma of someone not having sexual experience. But here's the thing: you get different kinds of people. You get people who are incel or virgin, but there's a bit of a difference there, and I think it's important to differentiate. And I'm pleased you brought up this question because I think it's important. So, a virgin is just someone who hasn't had sex. That might be from choice, from religious reasons, or it might just be that they have simply not had the opportunity for that to develop. An incel, I think, has a bit more of a socio-political connotation because it implies, involuntary celibacy, hence incel. It's become a kind of socio-political movement now, like I say, which has misogynistic overtones. Um, I think that this is something that needs to be discussed more, but in a responsible, mature way. Um, Otherwise, there's going to be more guys that maybe gravitate to these misogynistic groups, unfortunately. Um, Obviously, there's no excuse for that, but I also think that simply mocking guys, very often there's this thing that you'll see, particularly in macho circles, where virgin is used as an insult. But I think that speaking as someone, let me just put it this way: I I was never exactly a Casanova with the ladies. I was an introvert. I wasn't shy. I had female friends, but it was quite a long time before I had my first girlfriend. And you know what? To hell with it. I'm just going to be honest here. It was a while before I lost my virginity, like later than some people. I'm not a virgin. I've had experience, but it was a while. Some people might say I'm brave saying that. I don't think so. I think this is what I'm talking about. It's the sort of taboo that needs to be broken. So what? I'm 35, and for me, it was quite late, well into my 20s, put it that way. And all I can say is at university, the loneliness was unbearable at times. But I do think the mental health side of this, we say, why do young men kill themselves? This might be one factor. One factor. There'll be other factors as well, maybe job insecurity, financial problems, identity issues, a lot of things, peer pressure. But I would suggest that loneliness might be one factor. So I definitely think it's an area that needs to be looked at a lot more. So thanks for raising that question, Timor. I think it's important. I think social media has a part to play in this to an extent, but I don't think it's the only factor. I think Western society in general, you look at the music industry, it's absolutely inundated with sexuality, right? And there's a bit of a paradox in that because there will be feminists who say that women are objectified, yet you get female artists that are pretty much objectifying themselves with their art form. So there's a bit of a contradiction there. But yeah, I would suggest the West is inundated with sexuality, but I'm not a prude. I've no problem with it, generally speaking, but I do think that it can lead to pressure, peer pressure. And it isn't just men, women are under pressure too in different ways. I mean, yeah, it's unfortunate. But I do think loneliness in general is something that needs to be explored more. And I have a controversial take on this. I think that, this is something perhaps I've changed my mind on over the years, but I think there is a case for legalized prostitution. And one reason for that, not only I think it would put sex workers in a safer position, they're no longer controlled by pimps, they have more sovereignty over what they're doing. But I think that people who the fact of the matter is not everyone could just waltz over in a bar and say to a woman, oh, just flirt and that be natural. And the same with women. For people who maybe are shyer, or maybe they don't have the social circumstances, it may be from some form of isolation, perhaps it's a disability, perhaps it's another form of, disability. And I don't want to be stereotyping here, but loneliness is something that really, really needs to be taken seriously because the amount of unhappiness it causes is profound. So I personally think legalizing the sex trade needs to be looked at a bit more. I'm not talking about having red light districts on every street corner. I think it should be regulated. I think it should be, it should be done very carefully. Like make sure people trafficking isn't part of it. There's a lot of factors at play, but fundamentally, I think if someone, a free thinking adult, is choosing to sell their body and someone else pays for that, that's a mutual exchange, right? Because often with this debate, people often look at, maybe I'm going off on a tangent here, but they often look at the sex worker like she, I'm usually referring to women, but it's men as well. They are not empowered. But let's say, for example, you have a guy who, I'm just going to put this out here. Let's say you have a guy who doesn't have opportunities in other ways. He's very lonely and he goes to a sex worker. Now, I don't think that man should be criminally punished if it's consensual, if, he isn't abusing the sex worker in terms of getting violent. Um, I don't think that should be a criminal offense. And I think that you could get a situation, for example, where a pimp steals money from him and he can hardly go to the police and say, oh, by the way, I've paid for a service, but I've been cheated. Like they said, £100 and they've taken 500 from me or something like that. People laugh at this sort of stuff, But I really don't think that loneliness is a laughing matter, and I think that it needs to be taken seriously. I think there should at least be a debate about this. Right. So anyway, good question. I know I spoke a long time about that one, but I think it was good. Okay, just scrolling down. Thomas, do you think it's wrong for the EU to be vocal on Belarus? Sanctions are good, but I feel anything the EU actually says will play into Putin's anti-Western agenda. That's a good question. The EU as an institution, I think, has lost a lot of credibility in recent years, although I voted Remain in the referendum. But I personally, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be against the EU speaking out on human rights. I think that Western liberal democracies should speak out on human rights. And what's going on in Belarus is repugnant. I have a Belarusian friend, she's now in Poland, and I know she's very passionate about the subject, obviously. As a trainee journalist, I've got a lot of empathy for the young guy that was, currently under arrest. It's an appalling regime. The truth is, Putin's going to utilize anything the West says. So I don't think we should be guided by what Putin says. I think we should just do what's right by we. I'm talking about Western liberal democracies. Um, I don't think realistically the EU could be silent on this. Obviously, Belarus isn't an EU member; it is a neighbour. Um, I know Putin tried making an analogies with the Assange case, but I think there's a lot of differences with that. I don't think it's comparable at all because Assange fled bail. Um, Assange wasn't just a journalist. I think the analogies are flawed, but that's perhaps for another video. There's a lot to say about that. I think it's a mistake to just say Assange is just another journalist. I think he's not. Um, Liana, many, many thanks. Unfortunately, I'm at work, so cannot type English. English is not my first language. Please, ladies, join. Thank you, Liana. I really appreciate that. Ladies, do join. Any female subscribers, and I know there must be women out there because I think I've got 1,800 subscribers. They can't all be guys. So as much as I appreciate all feedback, you know, please, I would like more feedback from women as well. Um, Liana, can I ask where you're from, just out of interest? Because I like to kind of get feedback on, people watching me around the world. So, whereabouts are you from? Um, Paul, I fear centrists will end up a super hoarder and appear on Channel 5. Yeah, that's okay, buddy. I think I've got it under control. Thanks for the concern. I'll you know I'll be sure to give you people a call out if I end up on Channel 5 climbing over my newspapers. Liana, my apologies. I'm typing fast so I can do some work and listen. Have you seen Can't Get Enough of You by Adam Curtis? I've watched only the four parts. Would you please dissect it on a future live stream? I'm afraid I've never heard of that. I don't know who Adam Curtis is. Is it a show? Is it a documentary? I'm sorry, I really don't know anything about that. I'll need to Google it. Carl, have you heard what's been going on in Northern Ireland with the DUP and also what do you think about it? Its centenary year. To be honest, I sometimes deliberately switch off news in Ulster because I find it a bit depressing. I find sometimes it's just history repeating over there. Obviously, for others who don't know, I am from Northern Ireland. I was born in Belfast. I've grown up in England. So truthfully, I don't always follow Northern Ireland news extensively. I know my cousin does. My cousin's still over there, and he'll sometimes post about this stuff. Um, so honestly, I haven't really paid much attention to the recent DUP leadership transition. That's the truth. I can't comment in great detail. But as for the centenary, obviously it was on my mind. Northern Ireland just turned 100 years old. My late grandmother was born in 1920. She was actually born under the very last year of Ireland as a unified dominion, as it then was. Um, I don't know. The truth is, I think that the dynamics in Ulster are going to change. And truthfully, it is different from when I was born in 1985, i.e., the ratio of Unionists and Nationalists. I can see in the near future a Scotland style referendum happening on whether or not Ulster stays part of the United Kingdom. one thing's for sure: the Ulster Protestant unionist culture should never be sidelined. It should never be dismissed as an irrelevant thing. And this is something that both people in the mainland, Great Britain, and Irish nationalists do. They just dismiss Ulster unionist culture as, something that came yesterday. And it is something that frustrates me. I've never been sectarian minded. I've never been like a Israelite unionist. But there is a very distinctive Northern Irish unionist culture, and it needs to be accepted that that is there. By the same token, coming from that Protestant side, albeit, but my parents were never sectarian, I do think that there is a bigotry that is in unionism. Uh, it's probably improved from its past, but for example, I don't see the benefit of deliberately marching through Catholic areas to commemorate a battle that happened over 300 years ago. I think it's unnecessarily provocative. Yes, it's a cultural thing, but I don't see why it has to be through Catholic areas. Have have the bonfires within safety regulations. Some of them are ridiculously built up. I mean, forget the politics; it's just a safety issue. But honestly, I'll always have a connection to Northern Ireland. I also find that there is a pettiness to it, and it depresses me. I'm a man of the world, and I think, frankly, Northern Ireland politics can be very petty sometimes. And this actually reminds me of an anecdote. When I was working in China, I remember being at a kind of conference. They were trying to get me to teach more, and it was like all the other teachers were around. And they had a screen up with news, and it was showing something going on in Northern Ireland. And I was looking at it, and I was embarrassed because a few of the teachers were looking up and saying, "Oh, that's where you're from, isn't it, Nathan?" And I was embarrassed. It was a riot that was going on. So Northern Ireland will always be important to me, but I also deliberately shut off from it sometimes, to be honest. Okay, Liana, Thomas Robson, yes, it is coming home. Denmark match is going to be a tough one. Uh, oh, okay, people, I honestly don't know anything about football, so it's a head up. I can't comment on that. I'm British, so obviously I'm rooting for England, but the only thing I'll say about the football is, and I did make a video about this. It's great that if people can have a good time, and it's great if England does well. I think we are a sporting superpower myself. Um, I mean, the Olympics shows that, but it's a pity that there's always idiots who will take a celebration and turn it into something else, and that's the truth. The truth is, this country has a problem with lightishness, people being stupid. And my observation would be, if that's how they behave when England does well, i.e., during the German national anthem, or just generally making idiots out of themselves, how would they behave when England loses? Having said that, that image of the little girl crying, that was attracted very negative publicity. Something good came out of that. There was a Welsh businessman and fan, and he created this initiative to raise money for the little girl. So wherever there is yobs and hooligans and idiots, usually with a jingoistic edge, there is also a lot of decent supporters. That has to be remembered. Nevertheless, I think we do have a problem with loutishness and jingoism in this country. Yeah, and it's a fine line between being enthusiastic and supportive and just, acting in a jingoistic way. Are you from Denmark, Liana? Paul Armstrong, Italy is spraying, no pushovers. Yeah, honestly, people, I can't comment on the football, so that's something I can't. I just don't follow it enough. The bending of the knee at Euro is goofy. It's like a meme or pop culture posture. Doesn't even seem remotely like a protest. Yeah, my thoughts on the knee. I will say something about that. Um, I personally think it's definitely at this point. It's just looking like tokenism. And a big debate in the UK we've had is that people who take the knee, or rather, supporters who boo that, are somehow racist. I have a problem with that. Notwithstanding what I've just mentioned about loutish behaviour, I don't really like booing. It's unpleasant. However, maybe those supporters would retort it's the only way they can voice satisfaction with taking the knee as a gesture. Now, one of my main contentions with taking the knee is what about players, right? Here's something to consider. What about players who maybe don't want to take the knee? Will they face peer pressure from teammates? Will they be deemed to be right wing or even a racist if they don't? I don't like the forced conformity of it. And I think there's double standards. I mean, why is it that taking the knee is seen as progressive, but if other things wouldn't be? I mean, for example, recently there was the match in Munich between Hungary and Germany, and the German fans wanted to make a protest about Hungary's controversial anti-LGBT policies. So they lit up the stadium in the pride flag, but FIFA, or sorry, the UEFA argued that that was political and shouldn't be in the stadium itself. Well, here's the problem: if you say well, we should allow one type of protest, then I think UEFA made the right choice from that on the ground that if you allow a pro LGBT protest in the stadium, then Viktor Orban supporters would say, "Oh, okay, well, we have a right to, have a big poster of Viktor Orban or an anti-LGBT poster." So to me, when you start allowing sports and politics, or sorry, politics and sport in that sense, then you have to be consistent. And with that consistency, inevitably might come some unpleasant, bigoted views. That's the problem with it. Having said that, let's say you have Uyghur protesters, and China was at the Olympics, and those Uyghurs wanted to voice some sort of protest against China. From a human perspective, I wouldn't blame them. I just think that politics and sport, on some level, it's always been there, but I think if it's going to be allowed, it has to be consistent. Now, the problem with taking the knee, it's a very polarizing gesture, and it's representative of a movement, Black Lives Matter, which is very controversial and very polarizing, and in my view, has clearly racist components. So, my gut feeling is it's done now. That it's not achieving anything. It's just tokenism. It's almost cult-like. It's not achieving anything. So it should be dropped at this point. Boris Johnson criticised fans who booed that, but to just dismiss this booing as oh they're all racists. Certainly there might be some racists among them, but surely they have a right to voice dissent. If the players have a right to do it, surely fans have a right to peacefully voice dissent, as long as they're not hurling objects at them or making racist taunts. Is it not just a form of dissent? Um, you were busy reading CP. Don't think dating comes easy to people like you. I mean, you don't seem to quantify the sexual side. Okay, Liana, can I ask what you mean by that? CP, I don't know what CP means, but I want to be clear here. I'm not shy. I mentioned that when I was lonely at university, it wasn't from shyness. I just didn't really have the opportunities. I should probably clarify this point, but I'm not an introvert guy. I've had three girlfriends. So it's not like I've not had any experience. I'm sure you mean well with that comment, but I'm not quite sure what you mean by it. So Liana, I appreciate English isn't your first language, but you've said you were busy reading CP. Don't think dating comes easy to people like you. I mean, you don't seem to quantify the sexual side. I'm a man. I enjoy sex as much as any other guy. Sorry, I don't quite know what you mean by that. But I'm sure you mean well. So can you please just clarify that? You like just particularly at that point. I mean, you don't seem to quantify the sexual side. It's in English that sounds a bit. So can you please clarify what you mean? Alex Clay, hi, hello. Paul McGee, do you think that virginity is looked down on in different cultures, or is it just the Western world? That's a good question. Um, okay, and I'll answer your next question, Liana. Flirting is okay, but again, subject to interpretation. Promiscuity is a different level. I completely agree. Okay, so you're from Romania. I've known a few Romanians, and by the way, this is not here or there, but Alina Fasariu. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Beautiful lady. That's just yeah. Okay, so do you think that virginity is looked down on in different cultures, or is it just the Western world? I think that that's a good question. I think it's more the West, definitely more the West. I mean, in Japan, the number of young people who are completely isolated and never had any experience, particularly young men, is very strong. Um, I think that it probably is more a Western phenomenon, and it's ridiculous. It shouldn't be looked down on. I mean, like you say, there's two kinds of virgins. There are those who are virgins by choice for religious reasons, primarily because they want to wait until they get married, and that's fine. That's their right. The only thing I would say about that is, it might take time before you find the right person to marry. Um, Liana, I agree. There is a difference between flirting and promiscuity. Absolutely. I'm a red-blooded male. Of course, sex is great, but I don't want a sort of lifestyle. I don't know how someone could get satisfaction from constantly having different partners. Um, no matter how much, like let's say for guys, no matter how much of a red-blooded male you are, at some point, surely it's going to get mundane. And for me, it's like you value something more if you have it less. So that's my take on that. Not to mention it's reckless. I mean, I have a close friend who has had um, problems with sexually transmitted diseases. I'm not going to go into details because respect her privacy, but that's you can see the implications of that. Um, but yeah, definitely there's a difference between flirting and promiscuity. Um, I mean, recently, I'll give an example. I was at a bar recently, and I was flirting with some ladies in front of me. They were attractive. I wasn't looking to get like something out of that. I was just frankly getting a bit of practice in because it's been a while, and that was fine. It was, we were laid back, we were flirting, it was fine. Nothing really happened, but I felt quite relaxed, and that was that. Um, all hail the nation's virgins. Well, Romania, yeah. Welcome to our subscriber from Romania. My father actually visited Timișoara in the early 90s. Obviously, Romania was a very different country then. I'd love to visit Romania. Actually, it's one country in Europe that I haven't had a chance to visit yet. I've been to the Czech Republic twice, but I've never been to Romania. Um, Thomas, do you feel sorry for Keir Starmer? I feel okay. Sorry, I'll come back to that question. Liana, BBC documentary. Okay. Adam Curtis, English filmmaker, Oxford graduate. He's awesome to say the least. Worth watching. Bitter Lake, 2015 documentary. Thanks for that, Liana. I'll try and check that out if I get a chance. I've got so many recommendations these days. It's difficult finding time for everything. Um, but Bitter Lake, maybe I'll check that out, and if it's interesting from my perspective, I'll certainly make a video on it. So thanks for that recommendation. Um, Johnny Fletcher, I'm an avid reader of current crime affairs, and I'll come back to some of those questions. Thomas, do I feel sorry for Keir Starmer? I feel he has the right ideals to take Labour forward, but the Corbyn supporting sectors of the media will always find a reason to criticise him. I don't think it's so much the media. I think it's more the Corbyn faction in his own party. Do I feel sorry for him? Yes and no. Yes, insofar as I think being the leader of the Labour Party is one of the hardest jobs in politics. I think it is an incredibly demanding, complex job because Labour is a big party. It's actually the biggest political party in Europe by membership. Um, and so I think a Labour leader is always going to have a challenge of pleasing every faction at once. On the other hand, my sympathies are limited because I think that whilst Starmer is more of a centrist than Corbyn, and he will never have the toxic connections of Corbyn. And he'd done some good things initially, for example, tackling the anti Semitism issue head on. One big problem I have with Starmer is he's quite weak when it comes to standing up to the woke left. For example, I do not understand why Keir Starmer did not vocally come out in support of that teacher in Batley. That's a Labour area. The Prime Minister should have as well. But the Labour area, why didn't Starmer come out and say it's a disgrace that a teacher in Britain in the 21st century is living in fear, from Islamist thugs? I think Starmer needs to be a lot more vocal on issues like that. That says to me that he is still too politically correct and too much pandering to the woke left. He also hasn't defended Trevor Phillips, who was expelled from the party for basically questioning Islamist values in contrast to Western values. So my views on Starmer are quite mixed. He's definitely better than Corbyn, but that's not difficult. For me, he still has a lot more to do in terms of distancing himself from the woke left. And frankly, his taking the knee was ridiculous. That was just unnecessary tokenism. What Keir Starmer needs to do is really reconnect with bread and butter issues. That's where Labour is strong. That's where Labour can get votes. But I wouldn't totally dismiss Keir Starmer yet. He's not a fool. I think he's capable. But to me, he needs to distance himself from the woke left and be a bit more outspoken on certain things. The fact he's dull, for a politician, it's not the worst thing. But the problem is Johnson is still relatively popular. Boris Johnson, whether people like it or not, is seen as a character. Now, I'm not suggesting that Keir Starmer be something that he's not, but I think he needs to be a bit more outspoken on certain areas. Okay. So again, Liana, thanks for that recommendation. Bitter Lake. Um, I'll maybe check that out. I imagine that's a sort of true crime documentary or something like that. I'll certainly check it out. But I have so many things to go through at the moment. Might not have time immediately to look at that. Johnny Fletcher, I'm an avid reader of current crime affairs, and the one thing I've noticed with the far right is a lot of the people being arrested and charged are people on the autistic spectrum. That's interesting. I didn't know that. Well, I have a few autistic friends, and from what I know, it's a case that they tend to be very intelligent. Um, but in terms of whether they're gravitating more towards, can I just ask Johnny, are you autistic yourself? I mean, is that something you could personally relate to? I'm not talking about the far right thing, but the autism. Um, I do remember there was an Islamist attack in Exeter in, I think it was 2008, and the guy that carried out the attack had autism or something else, and the defence argued that he was exploited. But the thing is, with autistic people, they're very smart, so that would surely not be a mitigating factor. If anything, that would be an aggravating factor if they are knowingly involved in stuff. But I don't know. What's your thoughts on that, Johnny? Do you think there is something in that, or do you think people with autism are more likely to be attracted to extremist movements? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Thomas, curious to know your opinion on sectarianism in Glasgow. I'm a Rangers fan, but I'm not sectarian. Not from Scotland, but it's embarrassing seeing Celtic fans sing up the IRA or Rangers fans singing up the UVF. Yeah, it's not just embarrassing, it's also in bad taste, given that these are terrorist organisations that have killed and wounded men, women, and children. Definitely, Glasgow has a sectarian problem. Within England, I would suggest Liverpool does, but still, neither city is quite as bad as Belfast. But yeah, it's unfortunate that people can be so tribalised. I've seen this in Northern Ireland with certain people in the unionist community. They can be dogmatic and very, very parochial. And whilst I come from the Protestant unionist side, that whole mentality I find rather embarrassing and frankly sad. It's just, it's a very inward way of looking. I mean, these people in many cases haven't even travelled to England, never mind outside the six counties. It's a very inward way of looking. I understand the cultural side, but at the same time, you can, have a certain heritage or culture, but also, look beyond that. And I think it's healthy to do so. football hooliganism is coming home, I think. I hope you're wrong. I hope that's something in the past because we have come a long way. Declan, do you think July the 19th should go ahead despite rising cases and potential more mutations? Personally, I think we need to learn to live with the virus. Yeah, I can't stand football hooligans. I think it should be go ahead, to be honest. I mean, the virus will probably always be with us in some mutation. But in terms of the restrictions, in terms of the masks, absolutely, I don't think we should live with that because it's a huge sacrifice, particularly in Western culture. And most people, including myself, hate the masks. People have sacrificed. We will have to live with the virus in terms of some sort of strain being with us. To be honest, we still probably have some strain of the bubonic plague left over from Black Death. The issue is, can it be controlled? And I think at this point, we can't have a situation where there's always new strains. Oh, let's go into lockdown again because it's absolutely going to destroy livelihoods. Um, so I personally think that should go ahead, regardless of what the cases are, simply because we cannot have this perpetual situation of lockdown. That could substantially. I think someone at the start of the video mentioned other health conditions that might be abandoned. At this point, with most people vaccinated, with the number of COVID deaths drastically reduced in this country, I don't know what the daily deaths are, but certainly they haven't been. I mean, if we look at the height of the pandemic, let's say late last year, 800, 900 people were dying every day. Now, at the moment, it's in single figures. So I do think at this point we need to open up, regardless even of the Delta variant, because otherwise we're in the situation for perpetuity, and I think we'll always have a strain. So I guess if you mean living with it, accepting that we'll have that strain, but I think the masks have to go. To me, that's the first thing that has to go, and I know a few government ministers have said that. Liana, what's the situation in Romania? Is there big restrictions there? What are the number of cases like? Be good to have an international perspective on that. You value something more if you have less of it. You just answered your own question. I was meant to say starting later than other adolescents, your sexual life. Okay, so that's what you meant. I was in the same situation. I didn't complain. It was by choice. You mentioned the loneliness side of not dating. I think solitude can be embraced. I want to say that sex can be quantified. Well, that's the difference. I didn't want to be single. I was lonely. I wanted a girlfriend. And with all due respect, I would say that is a difference. If you are a virgin by choice, it's a very different thing than simply not getting opportunities. And I never judge anyone for saying that they want to have sex because it's a completely human desire, right? Consensual adult sex is a completely human desire. So I don't look down on anyone. I don't see them as desperate or something like that. By the same token, I don't judge people for being a virgin for religious reasons or just their own. They think it valued more that way. Um, but to be clear, Liana, when I say you value something more if you have less of it, that's true. I believe that, but that doesn't mean I don't want sex. I'm still a red-blooded male. I still would value that when it happens. It's just that it's not something that should be thrown around. It's not something that should be, you know, so casual because I think that can be a problem. Um, but you're saying like I didn't complain, but it was by choice. The thing is, that loneliness. I mean, you say it can be embraced. With all due respect, that's easier said than done. Because I remember, I was in Rome, I was in Paris, these famous romantic cities, and it was horrible. I just couldn't take in the sights because I was so miserable with the loneliness. Now, subsequently, I've learned to adapt to loneliness in a different way, but I think loneliness is a very human thing, and you say it can be embraced, but what's the recipe for that? How do you embrace it? I think that's a lot easier said than done, to be fair. Um, Oh, I see what you mean now. I want to say that sex can be quantified. So you were talking about, okay, it's just in English, it sounded a bit like something else. Like you were saying, I'm not the sort of guy who has sex. It's not true. Okay, I'm going to have to just. I don't want to lose the thread here. So, to some extent, but intimacy and real connection, pretty much that is what it lacks, especially at a younger age. Yeah, I agree, Liana. I think I'm quite old-fashioned and romantic in that sense. Without going into details, because it's I don't want to talk in great detail about my own girlfriend. It would be disrespectful to them in a video, but I certainly thought it was something to value. It wasn't something I took lightly ever. Yeah. So I agree. Maybe with that casual attitude to sex, it can be a bit flippant, and yeah, I do agree with you on that. But by the same token, I'm not a Puritan. I think that the desire for sex is totally human. I don't think that's something to be shunned or stigmatized, as long as it doesn't get to an unhealthy level. For example, if a guy is starting to become like creepy or you know, but I think the actual basic desire for sex is completely human. I'm autistic myself. I'm aware of how the more freedom rhetoric of the rights weighing in COVID times can be a draw for me, even though in the end I know better than to endorse extreme libertarianism. Yeah, the thing is, I mean, I'm not autistic, obviously, but I would say autistic people, and I imagine you would agree with it, Slope, are diverse as well. I mean, I'm sure you'd have left wing autistic people and right wing autistic people. I think it's, I would be a little bit cautious about making a causal connection between autism and extreme politics. Because by the same token, you can find people attracted to extreme politics who don't have autism. So that doesn't quite explain it. But if there's studies into that, maybe there is something. Probably it would be like Sloth, you mentioned that you can see the attraction. So maybe there is something in that. Liana, P.S. I would recommend Rory Stewart. It's a great game. Yeah, Rory Stewart's a man I respect. Prior to Bitter Lake, sorry again for commenting randomly. No, don't apologise. I completely welcome your contribution and thank you for coming to my channel. Uh, people can say absolutely anything. Thank you for having me, centrist philosopher, and I find your personal reflections spot on. Thank you very much, Leanne. I really appreciate your positive feedback and your contribution. Johnny, yeah, I have Asperger's. I would consider myself centre right, although I know a couple of friends who are autistic who are National Socialists. That's interesting. I personally probably wouldn't be friends with National Socialists if they were open about it, but yeah, thanks for your honesty. Well, do you think, Johnny, that there is? Do you think there is something in that? Do you think people with autism? I understand Asperger's is a form of autism. Do you think that there is a causality there? Do you think people are more likely to be attracted to extreme politics if they are that way inclined? Thomas, do I think Matt Hancock should be criminally investigated? There's some aspects of this scandal that might well involve criminality. For example, in terms of the breach of the restrictions, I think it should just be the same penalty as anyone else, not more, not less. Whatever the penalty would be for a regular person, should be the same penalty for Matt Hancock and his assistant. Um, there is increasing questions about the breach of security. That's not so much a criminal thing, it's more an embarrassment for the government. I believe the original video was from The Sun. Now, like I say, usually if politicians have affairs, it's not the sort of story I think. Like the tabloids love to, cook that up. Oh, a woman other than his wife. I honestly think the only person that matters to is his wife. He betrayed her. He didn't betray the public in that sense. However, for me, the big issue with that case is the double standards and the hypocrisy. In normal times, outside a pandemic, I really couldn't care less if a politician has an affair. It's bad for the wife or their husband, but that's between them. I don't think there's any public interest there, and I think the tabloids it's sleazy the way they act like there is. However, in this case, there is a public interest because of the double standards. So should he be criminally investigated with whatever is in the law? Yeah. Alistair Burns. Thomas Robson, I think he has been through enough at this point. Most people violated the rules to a far greater extent than him. Well, that's the alternative point, and I also agree with that. I do think there is a little bit of a pitchfork mentality with cases like this. It was the same with Dominic Cummings. In both cases, I understand the public anger because there is hypocrisy. But I mean, to look back to the Dominic Cummings scandal last year, when the press were clustered outside his house to doorstep him, I mean, they were breaking the restrictions. So they were being hypocrites as well. It was like, let's expose your hypocrisy and we'll be hypocrites ourselves. And I do think there is a little bit of a pitchfork mentality about it. Having said that, I think there's no excuses for double standards in high places. I felt angry when, for example, Michael Gove admitted that he took drugs when he was a teacher, yet he wants, oh, sorry, when he was a journalist, yet he believed in a hard line penalty for teachers who take drugs. I think the perception of double standards in power is something that the general public have a very, very thin tolerance level with. But in terms of how has Matt Hancock been punished, one could argue that because he's a public figure, because he's famous, the scrutiny that he will be facing, the fact his marriage is going to collapse, the fact he's lost his job, yeah, that's the other side of it. He probably has been punished enough. I mean, he's going to have to deal with his marriage breakup. So should he be criminally punished? I would say simply to the same extent as anyone else would be, not more, but not less either. Speaking from personal experience, I attempted suicide in university. Loneliness was the issue. I hated the area I lived, and not having that bond with someone in a romantic way really got to me. Well, thanks for your honesty, Thomas. I think a lot of people out there, more people than you might realize, can relate to the suicide issue or suicidal issue. At university, I wasn't suicidal, but it's something I experienced at other times in life. But yeah, loneliness is a very, very powerful thing. And there are ways to adapt to it. But believe me, when you're in a city like Rome or Paris and you're on your own, and here's the thing, I think once you've had experience, then loneliness becomes less because there's always that hope or the possibility it can happen again. So, for example, right now, I'd like to have a girlfriend. I don't have a girlfriend, but it's fine. I'm not losing sleep over it. Now, when I was at university, I thought it will never happen. And that was a horrible feeling. But I know now that, I had relationships, and in the end, those relationships didn't work out because of circumstance. But I am quite grateful for the fact that in my situation, I parted on very amicable terms. I feel lucky that I didn't kind of leave my partners with some flaming row. I'm still friends with one of them, and the other, we parted on very amicable terms. We've lost the connection, but she's married now. But I have happy memories from those times. I did miss them very much when it ended, of course, because I'm quite romantic and I invested a lot into that. But at the same time, those experiences gave me hope that it will happen again someday. So I think once you've had experience, it definitely is an important factor. And this is where I would say, I mean, Liana, you say solitude can be embraced and worked on, not loneliness. But there is a difference, isn't there, between solitude and loneliness? I mean, if I want to do a particular activity and I need time to focus on it, I'd prefer to be alone because having a friend around or, you know, I am quite independent minded. I like my own space. I think there's a difference between solitude and loneliness. And I guess the key is trying to let loneliness morph into solitude. But that I really do think it's easier said than done. I mean, I would ask you a question, Liana. You've spoken about how your experience was somewhat different than mine and how solitude can be embraced. Have you ever experienced the sort of deep loneliness that I and Thomas are talking about? Have you experienced that? And if you did, how did you get that transition from loneliness to solitude? Because there's no quick fix, it's not an easy thing to do. So, just out of interest, have you ever experienced that depth of loneliness? Sloth, you're right. I should have added the caveat that not all people of a community are the same way, and I also know left wing minded folks. Faulty choice of words from me. No, that's okay. I knew what you meant. Seymour Parish, do you work out much? I try to exercise every day. I'm going to the gym at the moment. With lockdown easing off, my university gym finally opened up again. I mean, I'm a member of the public. I'm not a student, but I've been there before, so they gave me an extra month, which is very nice. I try to work out. Heavy rain out there. Check this out. I don't know how clear this will be. Personally, I find watching the rain indoors is pretty relaxing, but also means my head is going to need to be cut again. So if you guys can see, I'll probably need to cut that again. The windows need to clean as well. Right, people, I'm going to have to round this up soon. This has been a very successful live feed, I think, but live stream. But I'm going to have to round it up soon because I have a lot to do. Do I work out much? Yeah, like I say, I try to exercise every day. I pull dumbbells. Just show you. 7 years ago, I took part in a charity boxing match, so I obviously had to be trained for that. There's my dumbbells. Boxing involves very intense training. I mean, that was perhaps the most intense training I ever had at amateur level. Do you think the three main parties of the UK have finished non-fit for purpose? That's a good question, but that might involve a whole video. So if you excuse me, I might not go into huge detail with that. I would say no, though, because I think the Conservatives are quite solid at the moment, even despite some of the recent sleaze. I can hear an uncomfortable noise. I might have to check that out. Johnny Fletcher, yeah, I can see how people on the autistic spectrum can be drawn to things like that. I'm unemployed with no IRL. I guess you mean real life friends. Living with my parents, I was nearly drawn into NS groups on Telegram. Johnny, all I would say is you seem like an intelligent guy. Just think for yourself, please, mate. Do not go down that path. I'm from Northern Ireland, and I can assure you, the young men who joined the paramilitaries that totally ruined their lives, they ended up in prison or dead. So if you're depressed with the way things are, it's never permanent. But please, please, please don't go down that line. Believe me, nothing good will come out of it. Liana, Thomas Robson, I'm sorry that you felt that way. What I would say is that we should not be validated by other people. That's a very good point, Liana. I completely agree with you. Um, yeah, I mean, I always say it's not just in terms of experience in that sense, but also in terms of, for example, what sort of job status you have, or I was going to say, sorry, I lost my trail of thought. I was just a bit distracted. There's a uncomfortable noise coming up there. I hope I don't have a leak. Um, yeah, so I don't think it should be validated by other people. Absolutely. I would say, we shouldn't let others define our achievements either. We live in a very, very competitive world where so many things are judged on how successful you are. A politician on whether they win an election or not, a business person on whether the business flourishes, an artist on whether their creative works get attention, a writer on whether their books sell, a sports person on their athletic prowess. There is so much competition out there in almost every human endeavor. But ultimately, I think we have to respect ourselves and we have to absolutely value our own achievements. I know what mine are, and I absolutely refuse to let anyone else put them down. Maybe they're not, maybe I feel there's more I can do. I know the achievements that I have got so far. Sloth, I appreciate your candor, Johnny. My disdain is primarily to well-funded peddlers of sketchy ideologies like Nick Fuentes or Robin DiAngelo. I'm not familiar with Nick Fuentes, but Robin DiAngelo, I agree, Sloth. I mean, the things that she has influenced, I think she coined the term white privilege. Absolutely despicable. Diana, I did experience, it was awful, but I practice mindfulness. So just a last question for you, Leanna, was that when you mean mindfulness, was that like a yoga or something like that? Some people are more socially inclined than others. I do like being surrounded by people. I have loads of friends, but it wasn't always like that. Agreed, Sloth. Zakar, thank you for the conversation. I only caught the last 20 minutes or so. I find you very relatable and enjoyable to watch and listen. Have a good day. Enjoy yourself. Cheers, mate. I really appreciate that. You too. Thanks a lot for watching. Carl, I really like the fact that you talk about virginity and the shame it brings. I really dislike it myself. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I certainly don't talk about flippantly. It's not something I would go out of my way to talk about. At the same time, it is one of the last great taboos in the West, and I really don't see why it should be. We talk about how many young men take their own lives. What if some of them are doing so because they feel they have no one to talk to? So if talking about it means more dialogue, more of a platform for that, so be it. And by the way, anyone on this thread, I'll just say this because we have spoke about mental health a bit in this video. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, but I've been through a lot of things, and all I would say to anyone watching this right now, maybe you haven't commented, maybe you're just watching. If you feel so depressed that life isn't going anywhere, maybe you're unemployed, maybe you've had relationship problems, maybe financial problems, please just hold on. I've had points in my life I was convinced that nothing would change, but they did. We can't predict the future, even if circumstances seem to not allow it. Something might come in. There might be an unexpected. I'll give an example. My last girlfriend came unexpectedly. I went to a party. I'd actually helped a student, Chinese student, and to kind of thank me for the help I gave him on an assignment, he invited me to this party. Now, he was a good looking guy. He was kind of a cool guy, had lots of friends. And she was there. And we just made this connection. And it was so natural. And so it was a beautiful thing. But I could never have imagined that would have happened. And it did. I remember I invited her to Sunderland, my city, in passing. This was in Newcastle, which, for those who don't know, it's a neighbouring city. And she basically agreed. I sort of said it in passing, like, oh, well, if you want to see my city, I know it very well. I was basically offering to show her around, literally, show her the museum, show her the public park, and so on. Uh, and I thought she'll just make an excuse, but she actually agreed. She was Chinese, and she was something special. She was like no one else I've ever known. Different from my first girlfriend, both special in their own way. But yeah, I missed her badly when she went. Um, I still do sometimes, but my point with that is it came unexpectedly. Experiences I've had in life when I thought they would never happen, they did. So all I would say to anyone watching this and who feel despair, it's shit. I get that. I've been there, but it's very, very, very rarely permanent. That's something to remember. There will be some angle that you could look at with something, some way where even put it this way, let's say your day today is shit. Tomorrow will be slightly less bad. So nothing is absolutely perpetual. Um, I love your live streams. Please plan more. Well, certainly, if they're as good as this, I will. I've had mixed records. Some of these live streams have worked out well. This is probably my best to date in terms of the feedback. The problem, like I say, it's difficult to know a time when everyone is available. Um, so that's the only downside, because people are in different countries. I mean, here we've got British participants, Canadian, Romanian. So it's difficult to know a time when everyone would be free. But certainly, if it's like this, I'd be very happy to do it again. Liana, Thomas, hold on there. You are great the way you are. If a relationship comes along, tread carefully and enjoy it. I am not the most confident person, young woman. I have faith, hope. Well, absolutely, I agree with that, Liana, in terms of what you said to Thomas. And for yourself, you come across as intelligent, thoughtful. Um, so certainly, if you lack confidence, that hasn't shown in the thread. You seem to be a thoughtful person, and your English is good. It's not. Um, Please don't let that put you off, because I'm an English tutor, and believe me, apart from that one sentence that I was confused about, everything you've said makes sense. So please don't be put off by that. You seem to be a thoughtful young woman. So, thanks a lot for watching and sharing your reflections. And to any other women who might watch my channel, please look at Liana's example. I'd like more participation from women. Seymour, your live stream brightens my day, dude. Family don't talk politics. Thank you. Oh, my family don't talk politics. Okay, I'm going to finish with this one because I really do need to wrap this up. Daniel Leach, do you watch Alex Belfield on YouTube? No, no, I don't. I've not heard of the guy, to be honest. Okay, I'll tell you what, I have a few minutes left. Anyone else have a final question? Hopefully, I've answered everything. Apologies if I've missed anything, but I think I've addressed everything. So I'll take one more question for now. The rain stopped. One more question, and then I'll round this up. By the way, I got this mug from my sister-in-law. She was living in Louisiana, so it's quite cool. Starbucks mug, kind of showing landmarks of Louisiana. It's quite cool. I think they have a whole series. Should we outlaw Antifa? I don't like Antifa. I think they are basically left wing thugs, far left thugs. My own politics is centrist. As people know, some of my politics gravitate to the left, some gravitate to the right. I don't like Antifa. I don't like the way they wear masks and go up and attack people they don't like. I don't like their propensity to anarchy and to vandalism. I don't like them. But the problem with Antifa is it's not a single homogenous group. They have lots of different chapters, and but certainly I think if there's to be consistency and we outlaw far right groups, then I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be prescribed if they engage in violence, if they engage in intimidation. I don't really accept this argument that if someone punches a neo-Nazi, that's fine. Oh, because they're a neo-Nazi. It's still common assault. And if we start saying that certain kinds of people should be assaulted just because of their politics, no matter how obnoxious or infuriating, then that's a recipe for anarchy. So yeah, I think there should be consistency. Outlaw them. I don't know about that. I think certainly in terms of the violence that they carry out, maybe they should be prescribed. Yeah, of course it would create an almighty stink. But one thing I'll say about Antifa, which I really strongly resent, is the way they hide behind being anti-fascist. I'm anti-fascist. Any reasonable person would be anti-fascist. Problem is they think that they alone are the kind of have a monopoly on this, that simply labeling someone a fascist makes it right. I forget who said it, but a lot of malevolent movements start with good intentions. That's something to remember. So yeah, many thanks everyone. I felt extremely included. Great community out there. Well, that was my idea, Liana. I want everyone to feel included, and I'm very happy to have female participation as well. So I just keep mentioning that because most of the comments are from guys, so it's great to have you included as well. And I encourage any more women who are watching this to please get involved. Great chat, everyone. Okay, people, I'm going to round this up. Flo, if you're in Canada, stay safe there because it looks very uncomfortable over there at the moment. And likewise, everyone, stay safe. Take care, folks. Have a good evening or good day, depending where you are. Liana, it must be nighttime with you, so have a good sleep. And Clove Jolly, it'll be morning where you are, so have a good day. Take care, everyone. I'll definitely do this again if it's as successful as this. Take care. Bye for now.